Good evening. Good evening. Are we live? Good evening. It is my pleasure to be in conversation this evening about aging while Black. It is a radical reimagining of aging and race in America, written by what I consider a lion of a man, Raymond Jetson, a former state legislator, a former pastor, a husband, a father, and a mentor to many. And so I think that this conversation is critical and important. And so I'm excited to be a part of this discussion tonight around aging while Black. Hello, good brother.
Gary, I am so excited to be with you, man. I have eagerly awaited this opportunity to share this space with you.
You and I both, man. I have been listening to you talk about this book for some months now, and through our conversations and coffee conversations, I'm excited to hold it, feel it, touch it, read it, and really excited about the conversation that you are starting through this book. And I'll just start by asking what motivated you to write Aging While Black?
So I have to begin, Gary, by seriously thanking you, not only for hosting this first virtual conversation in a limited series around this book. I made no secret to the very talented team that I work with that I really wanted to start this conversation with you, and it is for a number of reasons. Uh, First of all, um, the life you live and the truth you speak. It is important, it's refreshing, it's challenging often. You and I were laughing with each other earlier today. You know, the first time that we met one another, uh, it, you called out what you thought was problematic behavior on my part. And what I was gracious for was that when I reached out to you, you were open to the conversation, and that has remained the same. So I appreciate sharing this space with you. So
You
for
know,
me,
let me before you
go
go,
ahead.
I just got to say, I am grateful that Raymond Jetson is not an old man but an elder.
Well,
That he has consistently been, and not just for me, but for other young Black men in this community, other young Black women in this community, and around the country, availed himself to share that wisdom. I wrote a column in my publication challenging his support for a candidate. And I will tell you today that he was right and I was wrong.
well,
I can say that years later because there was wisdom that he had at the well that I didn't have. And that's why I appreciate you taking the time to write this book. So do tell why you decided now to write.
so for me, it is deeply rooted, Gary, in this profound, for me, recognition uh, that aging in America is not a race neutral experience.
Mm.
And there has been and continues to be this really important conversation about aging in America, huge sea change shifts I write about in the book that's happening. But we're not all aging the same in America. And the Black experience in America has been different in every way. Why wouldn't it be when it comes to aging? And so it was important to me that that message uh, get out because so very often Black elders are either invisible or reduced to these caricatures of real life. And the real truth is far more complex than that. And so that was at the heart of writing this book for me.
So you said it's not race neutral. Unpack that for me.
So there is a one of the theories of gerontology that I learned and got excited about and write about in the book is uh, uh, disadvantage, advantage, disadvantage compounds over time. That if you start from a place of advantage, over time, that advantage builds upon advantage, that by the time you reach old age, the gap between you and others is significant. The same is true of the converse. If you start from a place of disadvantage, then over time, those disadvantages compound. And the reality is that in America, Black people face systemic and structural disadvantages that they have to overcome just to be in proximity with opportunity. And so to suggest that people who have battled through all of the hurdles and barriers to success would all of a sudden show up in old age and be well is ludicrous to think. And so it doesn't. There are realities that are grounded and rooted in race, and we have to be able to talk about those.
In the book, you challenge us to see aging as more than survival. As more than survival, what inspired you to reframe the narrative around Black elders in this way?
So, Gary, so very often the dominant narrative around aging, especially for Black people, is one of decline, of surviving long enough to be
Mhm.
seen as lucky to be as old as you are. But that's not the whole story. Last week, my mom reached her 92nd birthday. And what I see in her life and in the life of so many others is something that is entirely more, something else. It's fortitude, it's creativity, it's adaptability, and this relentless commitment to family and community. And that's the story that I believe is important that we share. And so I wanted to reframe aging as not an end of relevance or importance, but on this continuum of purpose and contribution and leadership in our community. And so, Gary, it's not about nostalgia. It's not about looking back. Black elders are not just the ones who were there then. We are still here,
Mhm.
still shaping, still building. And that's the important narrative that I believe needs to be included as we discuss aging in America.
I am 39, and I was raised by my aunt and uncle, who I call mom and dad, and
Right.
they are both senior citizens now. And so mama is 79 and dad is 82. And in many ways, their health is different, right? Mom still exercises, is able to go do certain things. And in the last year, my dad now has dementia. And that's been a change for us as a family. And the whole conversation around aging, watching him as an elder Black man, who I consider one of the giants of my life, to see his condition in comparison to hers has been jarring for me, right? And it made me want to know more about the breakdown where you talk about how we are impacted as we age differently than others. Can you go into that? Because you talk about Alzheimer's and some of the other things that we face at a different rate.
Yes, I will, Gary, but what I'd like to do is thank you for the wonderful object lesson or case in point in your parents. Because what we see in your household, Gary, is aging while Black.
Hmm.
In one instance, it looks like someone who has relative good health, is still able to navigate clear headed, clear minded, able to do certain things. But for someone else, it's a very different experience. And so it is not this monolithic thing. Aging looks different. If you've seen one 85-year-old aging Black man, you've seen one aging 85-year-old Black man. And that's why I write in the book, Gary, how critical it is that we adopt a more individualistic, focused on the individual, centering the individual's experience. But grounded in truth is the experience of your dad with dementia. Black people are twice as likely as any other demographic to be impacted by dementia. And then when you add to that hypertension, uh, obesity, uh, diabetes, when you start adding all of these other things to it, you end up with terribly complex health conditions that so many people face. You know, I write in the book that you'd be hard pressed to find a Black person in America who does not have somebody in their family who has diabetes or hypertension.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we begin to think about that as something that impacts the aging experience, in some instances, high blood pressure is now being said to cause this inconsistent flow of blood to the brain, which may in some way contribute to what we see in the high incidence of dementia. And so we need to recognize that these are real issues. But you started this portion, Gary, by talking about being 39. The time to pay attention to our brain health is not 85, but 39.
Mm-hmm.
If we know that this is the reality for so many Black people, a higher number than any other demographic, then what do we need to do differently? You know, the last thing I'll say on this point, at one point in the book, very early on, I write about the quote that is attributed to Desmond Tutu of the two men who are taking the babies out of the water, and one of them gets in and starts to walk upstream, and the other says, "Why aren't you helping me?" And he says, "I'm going to go to see who's throwing them in the first place." We need to go upstream and start addressing some of the realities that are far too prevalent in the lives of aging Black people.
In the book, you say America is in the midst of the great wealth transfer. America is in the midst of the great wealth transfer. Economists project that $84 trillion will be transferred from the silent generation, aging boomers, over the next 20 years. This shift has a particular importance to Black communities. The Urban Institute reports that at least one implication is the widening of the Black-white home ownership gap. What data, when you looked at that data, and this is, all of these conversations are relevant, and I appreciate you
Yes.
going into that conversation, because many of us have never even considered what's supposed to happen when that portion of our lives happen, right? As children of aging parents, as well as parents who are concerned about their assets and ensuring that they can transfer assets to their young people.
So, Gary, my dear friend, in all of your travels, nationally and internationally, and maybe it's the serious job that you did with fund development, raising money as you were running for office. But you have become far too comfortable with big numbers because you read that 84 trillion far too easily.
I said the wrong number.
No, it is $84 trillion that is projected to be transferred in the next 20 years from silent generation and aging baby boomers to subsequent
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. And then the critical question, Gary, is how much of that is Black wealth?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point. That's part of the point. The relevance of the Urban Institute uh, data and their research is for Black people, generally speaking, the most significant generation of wealth that we hold is typically in our homes. And So if we are not intentional about passing that on, and you mentioned, the advanced care planning, doing wills, doing trust, doing succession planning, making certain that property that is in our communities and in our culture stays there, then the gap between Black home ownership and white home ownership is only going to be exacerbated. And when you consider that the home ownership gap between Black families and white families is essentially the same as it was before the end of Jim Crow, then we have a real problem.
So what you're telling me is we need to be purchasing property, that
We
we
need to
need
be
to be serious
purchasing
about purchasing
property.
property.
We need to be serious about purchasing property, but we also need to be serious about making certain that the property we own stays in our family and stays in our community. Because if not, all across this country, and Gary, you travel and you see all across this country, gentrification in a negative way, or as I would refer to it, development with displacement is a real thing
Yes, it
that's
is.
happening all across this country. And so it is important that we make certain that we make provisions. Just as a real simple example, if you don't have a clear title to the house that you are living in, if there is a disaster, you can't get federal emergency dollars. If there is a public sector, local home revitalization program, if you don't own the property, you can't participate.
Now let
And
me
so
jump in right there.
our property continues to decline.
I think it's important that we unravel that a little bit, because in 2016 we had a flood here. And one of the first conversations I got was from someone we both know that ran a big foundation in our city, who was trying to figure out how their foundation needed to activate in that moment. And one of the first things I said was, you got a lot of folks who live in air property. And what we mean by air property is, this is grandma's house, this is grandpa's house, this is great uncle's house, and we stay here, but nobody may have paid the taxes. Lights are on, it's functioning house, but we haven't paid the taxes, or we're not clear on who pays the taxes, who's got the title and the deed to the house. And then when the storm hits and you need repairs to the house, if there's a flood, there's no one person that can be identified by the government to be able to bring in that aid that's needed for those families. And that puts us in a place of complete despair, because you're already in a place of devastation. And now the resources that you do have available are not available to you.
Which only becomes even more pressing if your neighbors are able to access the resources and you aren't. But it also creates challenges in terms of the quality of our community if every third house, every fifth house isn't able to access this road to recovery because of title issues. And Gary, you are absolutely correct. It is a critical hurdle. I mean, not just in the South and not just in the Southeast, but I see it a lot here because we are impacted by weather events. We used to be impacted by weather events more so than the rest of the world, but now that's not as much a thing. But think about the number of properties that you see that still have blue tarps on them. Oftentimes, that's an indication that people are doing the very best that they can to make certain that they can still live in the house, but they're not able to access the resources that are necessary to bring the house back to its best or to its best condition. And one of the realities is that in many of those properties, Gary, we will find older people who are living in properties or living with family members or other situations.
The critical point in this, and I know that you touch on the need for us to get our affairs in order in the book. The reason my parents, again, being at their age, I'm not their biological kid, right? And so those whatever they want me to control or resource for our family from their assets, I would not automatically be entitled to those things absent of a will. And I think that we don't like to have those tough conversations with our elders. And sometimes our elders want to look at the young people in the family. You ain't trying to kill me off right now, are you? But those are real conversations. How do you, as an elder, how do you suggest that that conversation come about in our families?
So a couple of things. Again, Gary, you just provided an amazing case in point. The reality is, whatever your parents want to happen, if it's not in writing, nobody will care. There
Yeah.
are other voices and other factors that will determine what happens. There are these kind of default decisions based upon proximity and
Relationship.
relationship, other things that will determine what happened. And I mean, you can scream to the top of your lungs, and
And it
even
won't
other
matter.
people can feel it doesn't matter if it's not there. And so that's the important conversation. But Gary, one of the things that I write about in the book is that we have to rob these conversations of this mortality framing.
Mm.
This, advanced care planning is not about just what I want to happen when I die. Advanced care planning is, how do I navigate the milestones in my life? Where do I want to be? What do I want to happen at this stage in my life? And so that is absolutely critical and very important. The other thing that I write about is that these conversations need to be about more than just that, and there needs to be some regularity to them. So they are not these, oh, well, you're getting ready to die. Have you made all of your papers and gotten all of your papers in place? But it is this answer to the question of, how do you want to impact the world even when you're not here? How do you want your family to benefit from the life that you have lived? Those are the kind of questions that we need to reframe these conversations in.
I'll conclude my portion on this by saying, in our conversation, the complexity was there, and I think a lot of families have that complexity, right? And what I did was I went to my parents and said, "Look, I don't need to see what's in it. I don't need to know what you all decide to do with it. I just need to know that you got it done."
Mm.
And I think that that's a part of the conversation too, that you don't need to know every piece of the information of what's going to happen in that moment, but to know that that planning is done, to know that there is a pathway for us to make decisions as a family, and that we won't lose our assets. I like you, grew up in this majority Black neighborhood in North Baton Rouge. And as I'm watching these populations of elders age, I don't want this neighborhood to transform from what it is. And so being intentional, even in conversations with your neighbors, right?
Yes.
As peers, having conversations and saying, "Hey, what are you all doing with this property?" Some of your neighbors may not have descendants, they may not have children, and that property could end up in disrepair in our community, and you're somebody who has the resources to then add more assets to your family. And that's the conversation when you talk about care planning. I think you lean into this Sankofa model in the book, and
Yes.
it's talking about the holistic approach of how we deal with community. I think we've got to even be concerned about our neighbor in that way. Miss Bernice lives next door to me. She's 85. Her sister lives around the corner. She's in her 80s. And eventually I'm going to get new neighbors. And I want to make sure that those are good people that are just like these good folks.
And so, Gary, a couple of things. One, the book is rooted in the Aging While Black movement, and was written, as I've shared with you. I didn't write the book to be a New York Times best-selling author or to make a lot of money from selling books. I wrote the book to expand the message of Aging While Black, that is this movement that's taking root across this country. And the first pillar of that movement is to recalibrate the village. And so how do we begin to think again in terms of village. You're talking about your neighbors and new neighbors. Uh, where you live, Gary, is your version of a village. I write in the book, my great grandparents, both of them, were able to die in their beds, in their home. My great grandmother was 98. My great grandfather was in his early 90s. But both of them died in their beds, in their home. And they were able to do so because of the village that surrounded them. And we have, unfortunately, become very, very focused on me, mine, and not recognize that we're all in this together, and that includes aging.
You know, there's a dignity in what you just described with your great grandparents, and I think that one of the things that I've reflected on is how do we allow people the grace to depart with dignity, with all of their um, dignity intact in what is not always a favorable situation for people in that moment. And another thing you talked about is
But
health
Gary,
and
let
wealth.
me jump in on that one though,
Go
Gary,
ahead.
because there is a power, and it's not original to me. Dr. Peter Attia, who wrote the book Outlive. I was watching an interview that he did, and he dropped a question that really I had to put the book down and think about the power of. He said, as opposed to asking people what they want to happen when they're getting ready to die, what would happen if we asked them the question, what do you want to be able to do in the last decade of your life?
Hmm.
What do you want to be able to do in the last 10 years of your life? I mean, there is such power in helping people to be thoughtful about not just, the last 10 days, 10 months, 10 weeks of my life, but the last 10 years. And Gary, I come back to you uh, at 39. What happens? How does it change the way you go about life if you answer that question and say, "Here is what I want to be able to do in the last 10 years of my life"?
That new juicer in my in my kitchen
It
is
might
an
come out of the
indicator.
box.
It is an indicator of what I want to do in the last 10 years of my life.
Yes,
You know, I've lost 90 pounds in the last year, and you and I have talked about
yes,
the fluctuation of weight that we experience sometime. But it is becoming more cognizant of what you talk about, a holistic approach,
yes,
wanting to live a long life. And you say, I want to live in a world where health is not measured by the cold numbers of a medical chart. Holistic wellness includes the warmth of community, the vibrancy of culture, and the richness of lived experience. And that's so true. I look at that as, you know, my mom goes to these little aerobics classes. She goes to church on Sunday. She's still driving herself to all of these things on her own. And they inspire me, right? That
yes,
inspires me to want to be able to, like, you know, I want that independence when I'm at her age, and I look at her habits to from through my life, right? My mom, as in my the entirety of my life, she never drank. She drank before I was born, but you know, she got saved and all that stuff, and she was like one of them real converts. They cut it all out. But that discipline that she's had in my 20s, my early 30s, I never even thought about that type of discipline. But as I've approached 40, you know, like I told you, I got this juicer in there, and it's getting some action because, and this is my second juicer because I needed one that was faster for me to be able to get to work and get going with it. But when you talk about this holistic approach to health and wellness, and I love that you talk about the concept of wellness has been reduced to white walls, sterile spaces, and prescribing of pills, lots of pills. That is something I don't want to end up as when I'm 70 and 80 years old. And just speak to why that was imperative for you to include in the conversation.
A couple of things, Gary. First of all, I want to seriously celebrate you and commend you as I have done in private, because you didn't just go about losing weight. You wanted to improve your health, and you realized that there needed to be some changes. You also didn't go on just a fad diet, but you began this lifestyle change that is very important. The last thing that I will say to you is that when you think about your current situation, your well-being, while you are rightfully proud that you've lost 90 pounds, your well-being is not determined only by the number that shows up when you step on the scale. It's by quality of life. It's by relationships. It's by being able to experience things that might otherwise be challenging. And those are the framings that we need to talk about health in. I don't need to lose weight so that I can fit somebody's profile of what it means to be a typical human being at my age. I want to live this life because I want to grow old with my kids. I want to be around when my grandkids get here. I want to be able to contribute to my community and my family for as long as I'm here. And so that's health. That's well-being. As it relates to pills, one of my observations in the life of my 92-year-old mom is almost every time she goes to the doctor, there's a new prescription.
Hmm.
And the answer is medication, medication, medication. And a dear friend of mine, Dr. Delon Canterbury, has geriatrics, I think is the name of it. But he has a company, a business that's on deprescribing, on reducing the amount of medication that older adults are taking, because it's a huge problem. But again, Gary, I refer back to Dr. Peter Attia, who says that our healthcare system is not about health.
Mm.
It is a system to drive commerce. It is
Yes,
a
it is.
mechanism for the exchange of money between professional class, which is one of the reasons that it does not activate until somebody diagnoses something wrong with you.
That's right.
And so
That's
the
right.
system is at its most fruitful when you are sick. And so that is, I mean, our culture, I remember, and I write about it in the book, I remember the teas and the toddies, and when the weather changed, standing in line with my cousin, taking the
Yeah,
medications,
you told me about that.
the 3 6s and the black drought and the other things that were these remedies and these concoctions that out of necessity my great-grandparents and my grandparents created to keep us well. But it was take this now so you won't get sick, not take this once you get sick.
Preventative care.
And that's the mindset.
Yeah. We talk often in our conversations about the challenges between generations, the disconnect that exists between millennials and boomers, sometimes Gen X. And for me, I sit in this weird place, I think, because, like I said, my parents are older. I have a deeper understanding and sometimes empathy for my elders that I don't always hear in my peers. But there's a whole host of wisdom and knowledge that you gain from just being in the presence of elders. And I jokingly say that there's old people and there's elders, right? Old people just fuss at you. Elders give you correction, grace, and wisdom. Because we do need, a slap on the hand every now and then. But it's a difference in sometimes whether that's done in love or whether that's done in judgment.
Yes.
just speak to the need for the intergenerational relationships to navigate stronger.
Gary, the challenges that we face in this season far exceed the capacity of any single generation to effectively respond, combat, and make advances against. It is in our collective best interest to understand how we work together and how we function. I write in the book about reciprocal wisdom sharing. It is not the wise elder sitting on the hill speaking down to the young grasshopper. It is the wisdom of the elders and the ingenuity of your generation and others being combined. And if that's going to happen, I write in the book about both share and both learn. But in order for that to happen, we first have to show up with curiosity rather than conclusions.
Mm.
And so don't assume what somebody wants or needs, ask. And that goes in both directions. Secondly, we need to leverage our platforms to elevate one another, not just myself or my perspective. And so whether it's digital spaces, policy making tables, or community events, we need to make space for one another and be intentional about showing up together. You know, as I shared with you, Gary, that's why it was so important that we start this conversation and it's me and you. Not only because I respect the important work and leadership, but we have to model what it looks like for different generations to show up in the same space for the same purpose and working toward. And so we need to show up with curiosity, not conclusions. Leverage our platforms for one another's interest, not self-interest. And then thirdly, we need to advocate with, not for. And so it's about us really understanding how we do things together, because justice is for all generations, not older, not younger. It's for all of our generations.
You know, some years ago, there was an incident that happened in Baton Rouge, and when you say advocate with, not for, and I'm not gonna say the names of the folks who were in the room, but it was an incident that required city leadership to have a sit down and conversation. You came into the room with some other elders with me, and things went a little left at one point
Yes.
in the conversation. And I recall the actions of you and one other elder, Fred Jeff Smith, that day. And it remains with me because it affirmed me in a place that let me know there were people who had my back, right? And I think sometimes as young people, that disconnect is there because you don't always feel like they're with you in it. And so when you say advocate with, not for, I've seen you display that in a host of ways. And it has been impactful in my life because what I can say as a younger person, when we have that, it often gives the person who is in the bridge between us whatever they need to be able to be solidified in our leadership. Because sometimes younger leadership is not trusted in ways that the wisdom of an elder is. And so lending that influence and being willing to be in those spaces, I think is critical. And I think that I'm saying that to say that Raymond Jetson is not somebody who's just writing ideas in a book or telling you things based on a concept he dreamed up. This is his lived experience when you hear that. So when I heard you say that, it played back to multiple conversations and settings we've been in.
And thank you, brother. I appreciate that greatly. But Gary, I also want to remind folks that the subtitle of the book is A Radical Reimagining of Aging and Race in America. I don't in any way intend to suggest that what I say here or what I write about is widely experienced and the norm.
Mm.
What I am arguing is that it needs to be, and we need to reimagine how we create these spaces and how we go about this work. And that's why I offer what I do in the book.
You talk in the book about the technology piece of it, right? And how technology is a barrier in some ways. Walk through how we can aid each other and through generations in this path forward while we age.
Couple of things. First of all, it's critical to recognize the rapidity with which we are becoming a digital world,
Mm.
and the profound impact of artificial intelligence into those dynamics. We need to be really mindful of those. One of the not oft talked about executive orders from the current occupant of the White House is one that says after September of 2025, no federal reimbursements or payments will be made with paper. And so no Social Security checks, no income tax refund,
Hmm.
none of that is going to be done paper. It will
Now,
only be done digitally. Now
now that's a
imagine,
pause moment. That's a pause moment.
yeah,
And that's a pause moment because when we look at how these things will impact us, if grandpa's been getting that check in the mail for the last 10, 15 years, and he's not aware of that, that's going to shift everything in that family immediately.
and even if he's aware of it, but never picked up a computer,
Mm.
lives in a neighborhood where there's not a neighborhood banker that he can go talk to, the impact is profound. And so that's why it's so important that we embrace innovation and rapid change. We have spent, excuse me, please, we have spent decades talking about the digital divide, and rightfully so. And we need to, it is terribly unfortunate that another action of this administration is to seek to redeploy the $42 billion that the Biden administration had made available for broadband access and other things. But while we are battling for broadband access, we also need to recognize that lots and lots and lots, I don't remember the statistics, but lots and lots and lots of older Black people own cell phones, many of them smartphones.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what would happen if we became intentional in creating these learning hubs to help make certain that folks understood how to manage their affairs, how to conduct their finances, how to stay in contact with family and friends, all through that cell phone? I write in the book, a dear friend of mine, Louis Colbert, who lives in Philadelphia, who retired from the Philadelphia Aging Corporation after 40 plus years and is an icon in aging generally and Black aging specifically. Talked to me in a conversation about one Sunday a month, for the most part, in his church. Uh, the fellowship hall becomes like an Apple store.
Mm.
The young people sit at tables, and older adults come sit at a table and say, you know, boy, show me how to do this, or I'm having a problem doing this. How can I do this? And it's a comfortable environment, uh, and they are sharing and interacting together. Now, I am also aware, and I know you are a good brother of faith, but not everybody goes to church these days.
Correct.
So what are the other spaces where we can create that kind of interaction? What are the organizations where younger and older Black people are showing up together, and how do we make that a part of the culture so that we are helping people to navigate the world that they live in.
That leans into the thought that you talk about recalibrating the village, reimagining the community. What are other ways that we can reimagine community as we navigate? And before you answer that, if you're watching and you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. We're going to answer questions in the next after Raymond responds to this. So the recalibrating the village.
So much of the engagement with an older adult happens in systems that act as if they are the only person involved with that older person. And so, for example, when your dad goes to the doctor, the healthcare system acts as if they are the only system that impacts with your dad.
Mm.
When your dad goes to church, the church acts as if they are the only system that's engaging your dad. If your dad went to an adult day center or something else, so much of the services, so frequently, and this is not everywhere, every place, so don't at me or get in my DMs with that. But so very often, we engage people as if we are the only folks engaging. And what I write about in the book, Gary, is families have to start owning the village and creating the village and insisting that there is this communication across systems and across structures. You know, what happens when your dad's health realities are also recognized in the church, but also, and I don't know if this is the case, but if he still wanted to show up at a Masonic meeting, if the Masons understood how they needed to engage your dad so that he could still be a Mason, even though his life is changing dramatically. How might that impact his life to be in a space that was familiar with him, rather than being isolated to these walls and silos of care? And so what I write about in the book is the need for someone, families ideally, but not always, but for someone to connect the village so that there is this shared understanding of what it takes for this elder to thrive.
So looking ahead, what gives you hope about the future of aging in Black America?
Conversations with brothers like you, and the fact that you and others, I did an Aging While Black Live at AWB Live with Ronaldo Hardy, which was entitled Why 40 Hit So Hard.
Oh, wow.
That there are a couple of brilliant young people out there. Christina Peoples, who has an internet presence, an Instagram presence called Real Homies Want to Know, where she just drops serious evidence-based, empirically backed, scientifically appropriate information in a way where real people from the community can grasp it. There's a sister in North Carolina, Ashley Stevens, the dementia guru, who out of her own lived experience dealing with her grandparents and dementia as a young child became so motivated, went to school, studied, became a social worker, and has created this unbelievable platform. I'd invite people to look at both Christina and Ashley's platform. They give me hope, Gary, because these are brilliant young Black women who are in this space driving stuff. Archie Roundtree is a brother who lives in Los Angeles, young lawyer, works for justice in aging, but is just out there, man, moving in spaces. And Archie, I don't know if he's made 30 yet.
Wow.
And so there are these folks in these spaces. Samaji Best in Dallas, who lived here for a minute, is a member of the Aging While Black board. is moving in spaces. Samaji did an interview on Juneteenth with Ambassador Andrew Young, and just
Mhm.
looking at that picture of wisdom and youthfulness. Samaji just made 30. And so there is this rising crescendo of brilliant Black minds who are giving thought to aging, and that gives me hope.
When you look at the data, where we are, and the hope that you have, if you could prioritize for a person in their 30s, what they should start with, and then a person in their 40s, in their mental framing of how do I start framing myself around aging?
I would encourage them, Gary, to look at my network. Look at the things that I'm a part of, the people that I'm connected with, and ask myself the question, what do I need from these people and these organizations to make certain that I thrive as I age? And to begin to be thoughtful about that. I'm a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, and I spent time in Phoenix at the National Conclave. And Gary, I stood in line with a brother from Georgia, and I asked him. I said, "Look ahead, 10 people, and look behind 10 people, and tell me what you see." He saw brothers who were graying. He saw brothers who needed a chair to sit in. And I said to him, now fast forward 20 years. What do you think this line looks like?
Hmm.
And so how do we begin to think about that personally? What do you need from the people around you, Gary, to continue to thrive and to advocate even as you age? And how do you begin to build that now rather than looking for it later?
If you were given $1 billion to go towards the issue of aging, how would you go and spend those resources?
Uh, I was really hoping you'd put a period after being given $1 billion. Because I was going to start naming the islands that I was going to buy houses on, and
I
just go
love it.
from just go from one to the other, until either I or the boat stopped running. Uh, but if I had $1 billion, I would, Gary, invest it in the most critical institutions that impact Black life, and respectfully with them change their mindset around aging so that they became intentional about helping people maximize their experience within their institutions, whether it's churches, social organizations, Divine Nine, just social justice organizations. What does the NAACP look like 25 years from now?
Hmm.
And so engaging those institutions so that they adopted a profoundly different mindset as it relates to people aging would be what I'd do with that money. That's recalibrating the village, my friend.
The last thing I'll ask you, when you say elderhood is fractured in America,
No,
unpack that.
elderhood in a
In
fracture.
fracture, in a
Yeah,
fracture in America.
man, America is broken. I mean, America is torn apart, and you have people who are growing old in the midst of that. You have people, Gary, who fought for our right to vote and our right to be in public spaces and accommodations, who are watching their work be dismantled on a daily basis. You have people who are having their history eliminated. Uh, you, Imagine This is the end. These are your last years here. You've worked your butt off so your family and your community could be better. And now you're in the midst of this. You know, it hits us in some kind of a way. But imagine my mom. Imagine being 92. I mean, she's been through this once before. I mean, she had to teach school out of state because the segregated school system would have no parts of her as a young woman to begin with. And now you're here again. And so that's what I mean. It brings an additional layer of urgency to aging while Black in America.
You know, I'm so glad that you wrote this book, and I hope that as many people as possible read it. I know you're not striving to be a New York Times bestseller, but I am hoping that it will become one, because I think that Black people in America need to be more intentional about the conversations we're having holistically. I think we focus in on two areas mainly a lot of times, wealth and politics. And if we aren't talking in those two areas, typically the conversation is kind of bland. And outside of the things that they call it a type of internet that I'm not going to say on the Aging While Black platform, but outside of the drama that exists, we need real action plans. We need real data-backed perspective that gives us tools to be able to go and navigate this journey, and to give us the ability to think again, to be curious again about our future. And my favorite thing of this entire conversation is allowing me at this age to think of, what do I want to be able to do in the last 10 years of my life? And this book helps you answer that. Book helps you go in the direction of understanding what it takes for you to be able to thrive in the latter part of your life, not just to survive. And so, Raymond Jetson, thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion with you. But more importantly, thank you for living as a Black man into this point, and taking this season of your life to scribe for us the tools that are necessary for us to navigate better as a people as we age.
My brother, I always enjoy spending time with you and sharing with you, and that has been no different tonight. Thank you for immediately saying yes when I reached out to you and making time for this conversation. I've enjoyed sharing with you, and thank you for stressing the importance of the book. I'll end, Gary, by saying that in the last chapter of the book, I talk about aging as a shared generational experience. You know, for my generation, it's Social Security, retirement pensions, and other things. For your generation, it is the financial collapse of 2008 and 9 and its impact. For your generation and the generation behind you, it's going to be student loan debt and other things. And so the names and the systems change, but the reality is that our aging experience is impacted by systems and structures around them, and it's in our best interest to understand how we navigate them together.
Indeed. Thank you so much, brother. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much, Gary. And thank you for those of you who have joined us live, and those who will watch this later. And so I will share with you that we'll do this again. I mentioned my dear sister Samaji Best earlier. Samaji and I will be sitting in this space sharing a different perspective on aging while Black. And so I invite you to please join us on August 7th, same time. And I pray that you'll make time to join us.